I want to start with a personal story, if you will, indulge me. On Monday, Bank Holiday Monday, returning home from home, I'd visited my family. I got on the London Underground with my little boy. You all know I've got a little toddler in a pram. When I boarded the tube carriage, I have to say, there was a big group of people sucking whatever, I dread to think what it was, in their balloons, and I moved down the passageway, whatever you call it, the platform, to get on the London Underground at the very end. When the tube doors closed, within seconds, it felt like, basically it all kicked off. This absolute madman on the tube threatening passengers for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It was, I have to say, I am quite a tough cookie, if I say so myself, but being in that situation on a packed tube carriage that was very, very enclosed, this guy ranting, raving, going up and down the carriage, threatening people. I don't mind admitting I was absolutely petrified. The main reason I was petrified was I had those images of that awful situation that happened in Annecy, where that guy was going around stabbing children in their prams. And I panicked, and I found myself moving my child to get him positioned as far away from this guy as possible, which, trust me, was not far because we were there packed in. Anyway, I bent over my little boy's pram, and this lady crossed, she got off her seat and she came and stood right next to me, and she helped me shield my son. And she was shoulder to shoulder with me, and she said to me, don't worry, I'm going to help you, we'll look after him. And I can't even tell you how much it touched me. The whole thing shook me up. It was over very quickly. Tube stops, for anyone that knows, will be about 2 minutes long, so it was about a 2-minute incident. But I've been thinking about it ever since, and I took to Twitter yesterday, actually, to describe my feelings, mainly to thank the person involved. I'll just get that tweet back up for you because it popped up and then it disappeared. And I said the following. On my tube carriage yesterday, a madman was threatening passengers. I tried to shield my toddler who was in his pram, and a lady crossed the carriage to stand alongside me to help protect him. Luckily, the guy did not reach my son, but it was so scary, and I am so grateful to that lady, so thank you. And there you go. I thought, well, that was the end of it. But no, I had a huge response to that tweet, including one from a Labour councillor who took me to task about my language. So the first thought wasn't about the safety of me and my 2-year-old son. It was actually about the language that I'd used to describe the perpetrator. She said the following. A better description would have been a man suffering with mental health problems who became threatening towards passengers. Dehumanising someone just continues negative stereotyping towards those with mental health conditions, especially when access to mental health services is limited. Well, I've got to say, dear listeners and viewers, that infuriated me, because I feel, and I don't know about you, that in this society, in this day and age, there seems to be this shift away from the victims of crime, away from what those guys are experiencing, and more towards the perpetrators of crime. It certainly feels that way to me. So when I saw that tweet, I certainly was not happy. Anyway, a little bit of back and forth followed on Twitter, and I invited the lady to join me on my show to actually debate this with me. And I'm pleased to say that she accepted that invitation and joins me down the line.
Now, I would never, ever condone anybody's behaviour that you experience, Michelle. That's truly horrific. And I'm glad that you are okay, and I hope your son is okay and not left with any long-lasting issues. Yeah. My concern is that targeting people who are vulnerable is a continuation that's happened over the last couple of years. And it's really hard to keep sitting back and listening and reading people saying, well, actually, they're a madman, they're nuts, they're anything that you portray. Obviously, that's not the behaviour of somebody that is of clear mind.
But you see, this is where I take issue. No, hold on. I've listened to you intensely. This is where I take an issue. Firstly, regarding your description as a Labour councillor, that's your description on your public Twitter, the account that you're using to contact me. So hence, I'm describing you the way that you describe yourself publicly, point one. Point two, I have to be honest, when I look around in society, I am sick and tired of people not having to face responsibility for their actions. Personal responsibility seems to have got lost into the ether. Yes, I concur with you, actually. I share your concern and your frustrations about the lack of mental health support in this country, especially you're talking about teenagers. I think that things like access to CAMHS is absolutely appalling, and I think many people need to hang their heads in shame when it comes to how we fail people in society that experience mental health challenges. So we concur on that. However, that is not what I'm describing. What I'm describing is my experience of being in a tube scenario, which was absolutely terrifying. And for the life of me, I cannot fathom why somebody's first response of the left, because it was your first response, yes, as a secondary point, you did express concern. Your first response is to protect the perpetrator and tell me what I should be using, what descriptive terms I should be using in order to soften my description of this guy who I stand by was an absolute madman. If you want to take that descriptive term and then extrapolate that out to meaning that someone's got mental health issues, I would say that the person then that is kind of criticising and putting everyone with mental health issues into a basket is you rather than me. Because if I drove fast or whatever and hurried around to get somewhere A to B quickly, I would say, oh God, you know, I travel like a madman to get here. I was rushing around, I was hurried. I wouldn't use that as a term to say that somebody has a mental health issue.
And that wouldn't be taken either, because that's not in the same context. With regards
but you don't get to tell me the context of my descriptive terms. And this is the issue that I have with people. In society now, we are told how to use words.
And communicating as a town councillor. I am communicating, one, as a person who has great understanding and knowledge of people, young people and adults with neurological conditions that can seem to be angry in some cases and not have the right support. Yes, this person should be confronted with consequences. There should be. This is behaviour that is not acceptable to frighten general people in such a closed environment as the tube is very frightening. And I totally agree with that. My point is to use such inflammatory language just continues to target our young people and older people who do have mental health conditions. If there was the access to mental health support, and this young man had got that, he may or not have been on your tube.
How do you know he's got mental health issues, this perpetrator, by the way?
As I said, I'm not condoning his behaviour.
How do you know he's got mental health issues?
The right access and the right funding for mental health support, there are far less opportunities and chances for people to get into that state.
How do you know he's got mental health issues?
And they do, which is another thing that I mentioned to you on Twitter. People with who are struggling to cope then go on to self-medicate through alcohol and addiction, which is what I also mentioned on social media. And then that escalates. That snowballs so that people have to fund that. By funding that, they often get themselves into petty crime. That snowballs again, and they get worse. And our prison population is then increased dramatically because these people go in for 2-3 weeks, when what actually would be cheaper in the long run would be to support the mental health services properly and then dramatically reduce this. So you, Michelle, and your toddler would not have been put forward in.
So I will try for the fourth time, because I'm giving you the respect of letting you talk as much as possible, but it's a two-way exchange. How do you know that this person has mental health issues? Because I certainly didn't, and I was stood in a tube carriage with him. So how do you know that?
How do you know that he's a madman?
Because that's the term that I chose to describe him, based on his erratic, aggressive, ridiculous, threatening, violence behaviour. That is how I chose to describe him, and I stand by that. So what I'm fascinated by, because I see this all over society, something bad happens, and the first thing that many people do from the left, they immediately do what I would call playing the mental health card. Why?
Because mental health isn't supported. So from my perspective, what all those adjectives that you have described confirm to me that that person may have an underlying problem. As I
but
said
you see,
before,
I find that if I had mental health issues, I would find what you're saying pretty offensive.
Not go around doing that.
But if I was suffering with mental health issues, I would find what you're saying pretty offensive. Because what you're saying is if someone acts in a violent, aggressive, impulsive, threatening manner, then therefore they must be in this basket of somebody that has a mental health condition. I would reject that if I was one of those true sufferers.
Would you say that that person approached you and the rest of those commuters with a sound and safe mind?
I don't know. And can I be completely honest as well, and you won't like this, I couldn't care less. I could not care less about his state of mind. I care about my safety, but primarily my 2-year-old's safety, and beyond that, the safety of everyone else in the carriage. This fella's state of mind, I genuinely couldn't care less about, and I find it fascinating. I guess this is the point I'm trying to get to. Yes, we all concur that mental health services and all the rest of it need to be funded better. We're on the same page with that. Yes, we concur that people are being let down, but I'm fascinated that when there is wrongdoing in society, why is the immediate, primary, first response to blame it not on the individual, not on the individual's choices and actions, but instead on this mythical third entity of mental health? I can't understand it.
Then I would turn that round and say, why is it that those on the centre and the centre-right then jump on the bandwagon and use it as a prod to keep having a go at certain groups, which is another thing I mentioned on social media.
Who was I having a go? Which certain groups was I having a go at? Criminals? Violent individuals?
But you do. You're known for it, Michelle. When
yes,
you were
I absolutely
on
did have a go at violent criminals, and I would continue
for your inflammatory language to get you this publicity, when actually we should be caring about our fellow human being. Right. We should be thinking, well, actually, yes, I was frightened, my God, and we're safe. But what should have happened for that person? Who could have helped that person before they got to me on the tube so that didn't need to happen? Because too many of our people are falling through the net. Do you know, my own child at 6 years old was illegally expelled from a primary school after diagnosis and statement of autistic spectrum disorder. And that evening, I found him hanging. I caught him by a minuscule of a minute before I'd lost him.
Well, as a mum, I must express sympathy for that, because that would be horrendous.
From young children to older people. If they're not supported and that funding is not there, then we end up with a society that is angry, that will then attack others. And there, as I said before, there should be consequences. But my God, this government needs to start funding properly and supporting others. The only reason why I became a Labour councillor was supporting 3,000 families who've got children with neurodiversities, and had to organise a protest march when our local MP signed off on a 40% reduction in the child and adolescent mental health service, which meant we had one consultant that covered Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin.
Well, look, let's end this on a point of agreement, because for time reasons, that is all I've got time for.
In the morning, threatening suicide.
Well, look, I think let's end on a point of agreement. As I said, as a mum, from mum to mum, what you just described with your own son is horrific, and I'm very sad as a family you've experienced that. We agree on the mental health services being reduced. We both agree that that is wrong. That, however, is where our meeting of the minds stops. I do, however, respect you for taking the time to come on and debate with me, because many people, you know what, in this day and age, they throw all kinds of stuff over the Twitter and they don't have the kahunas to back it up.